Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H virtual event space. Now, when you see SanDisk next to hosted by, it's going to be good. And when you see Andrei Duman next to speaker, it's
Gonna
going to
be
be
extra good.
wild. It's going to be amazing. We're going to get our minds blown as usual. So for that, look, Pete, you always do such a good job of it. So I'm going to introduce you and let you introduce Andrei.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having us. We love coming to the event space and getting a chance to talk to everybody. I don't have any housekeeping bits, so I'm just, without further ado, I'm going to give it off to Andre and let him take over. And, Derek, you and I will stay on. We'll be taking customer or attendee questions. So if you're watching this live stream, put any questions you have in the chat, and Derek and I will feed them to Andre throughout this. So thanks, everyone. And Andre, take it.
All right. Well, thank you for having me yet again. Hopefully people aren't getting bored of me. Thank you, B&H, and thank you, Western Digital. And yeah, welcome everyone to this project that unbelievably, I can't actually believe that it's actually finished. I've been working on this for so long. It's really been a year and 6 months in the making, which is kind of insane to really think about it. Not that I was working constantly through it, and I'll explain why it really took that long, but it's just something that when you have a project that's that long, you almost don't want it to end. It sort of it becomes that much more part of you as opposed to just going out to the beach and shooting a great image at the beach. It kind of takes on its own life, if that makes any sense. But so I guess one of the questions that I always get asked about this particular project is, how did this thing even come about? Where did this idea even come from? And initially, it was never meant to be about Legos. As you guys know, I have crazy, stupid, insane ideas that I try and work out, and 95% of them do not work, and they're terrible and horrible and will never see the light of day. And this was another one that I wanted to sort of experiment with, and I don't even know how I thought about it, but I wanted to do something with human organs, because not human organs, obviously, in their flesh, in their real life, but I just found them fascinating. And I think the human body is just something that's so fragile. And again, we just sort of take it for granted that, quite frankly, we even wake up in the mornings. It's insane how these things inside of us are working all the time, and they're not breaking down. And when they do, it's horrible. And I'll get into that. But I wanted to do a project where I was basically going to be shooting top down the outline of what you see in anatomical books, a heart, a brain, lungs, or whatever. But I wanted to fill that particular section in that shape, actually with fruit and vegetables. So it was going to be very ripe, I don't know, pick your fruit, apples that were going to be very green, beautiful, taking that shape. And then in the lower right section, for example, it would start to get a little bit decayed, and to the very bottom, it was going to be kind of rotten. And what I was going with that sort of destructiveness of these beautiful ripe vegetables was the concept that if you eat too much sugar, your teeth are going to get affected. If you smoke, your lungs are, you're going to get lung cancer. So sort of that sort of cause and effect that we again take for granted, thinking that we're completely invincible, when in fact these are real flesh organs and they're gonna break away. I never actually shot it, but that idea really stuck with me. I got carried away. I had personal projects and I had client projects coming up, but I always had this sort of concept that I wanted to do. And unfortunately, in that gap between my initial concept and taking on the sort of Lego project, and it's kind of hard for me to even talk about it, so I apologize if I get a little bit emotional, but my mom had developed and was developing far worse dementia. And it was just kind of horrible to see someone, obviously, that you love so much going through this, and starting with her being perfectly fine up to the point of she doesn't remember me really, and just seeing how that affected so many things. So in a sense, this particular project took on a different life because of that. And in a way, it was me trying to deal with that situation. And weirdly enough, I thought of bricks. And why did I think of bricks? And why did I think of Legos? Is because I kind of was trying to deal with the issue. And I was thinking how, with dementia, specifically with dementia, and obviously how it affects the brain, it felt almost like her brain was falling apart, almost piece by piece, brick by brick. And that's how I was imagining it. And horribly and weirdly, then the creativeness came of like, how can I how can I put that in a photograph? How do you do that? And that's where Legos came about. And that's why, what if I take that concept I had with the vegetables and try it with Lego bricks? Now, everyone loves Legos. I've been a fan my whole life. I haven't built one since I was a kid, so I am by far not a Lego builder in any way. And what I did, which I do with pretty much most of my projects, I searched online, who is the world's greatest Lego builder? I had no idea. And obviously Nathan Sawaya, who is a god and a genius in his art form. His name popped up. I've never met him before. I never spoke to him before, and I sent him an email. And a lot of times that's really what I do. And I think I've spoke about that on some previous webinars, where just pick up the phone and just call them and or email them and just say, look, I'm really passionate about this. I really would like to do this, and I think you're amazing, and I'd like to collaborate. Can we do something? Many times it will fail. You will not hear back, and you have to be prepared for that. And fortunately, he replied almost the same day, and he was like, I'm interested. I want to find out more. So we scheduled a call, and I kind of presented him this concept that I had, but I wanted to flip it. So I did mention the fruit concept to begin with. And again, like I mentioned, that's a very destructive, right? So it's basically going from ripe vegetables all the way through to the rotten side of things. So that shows the breakdown, the decaying. And with the time passing and my mom's condition and how it was progressing and getting worse, I wanted to actually flip it. And I wanted this to be constructive. I wanted this to be a positive rather than a negative. And I came up with a concept that if he can build me some of these organs, these human organs, and a section of them to be missing. So there's a section that has a hole in it. And what I wanted to do was then shoot individual Lego bricks that create a trail that's almost like flowing and beautifully moving around them. And they're filling that hole as if so basically the viewer will see it as these organs are being built from the ground up, if that makes any sense. So in a nutshell, that's really how it kind of came about. So that's step one of initial concept, reaching out to Nathan and partnering up. Step two is actually, building these things. So he invited me over to his studio. He has an amazing studio in Los Angeles that has, I think, 8 million pieces, if I'm not mistaken. So Nathan is an ambassador for Lego, and he does a lot of work, obviously, with Legos, and he's a master builder. And he's one of the very rare few people that can literally call Lego up and say, I need 1 million of the pink with the three, the 3 brick thingy or whatever it's called, and they'll send him 1 million of them. So it's very custom, very much the ordering is very custom in that sense. And my initial idea to begin with was, let's just start with something that's really familiar, something that everyone very quickly can recognize. And to me, the brain was, something that was we just knew immediately. You see an image, you know exactly that it's a brain. And he said, okay, fine. We'll start with that. But I did mention to him, like, can we make it a little bit bigger than, let's say, a human-sized brain, just so we get a little bit of texture, you get a little bit of sense of scale, if I can try and get some detail in there. He said, not a problem, come. 2 weeks later, he calls me up and he says, the brain is ready. And I will share some images, and I will go back and forth between sharing, because there's a lot of images and they're kind of all over the place, but that's kind of how my brain works. And he invited me back, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's probably just best to show you. This was the brain that greeted me at his studio. It's absolutely gigantic. It is massive. It is incredibly detailed.
Andrei, did you give him any kind of like guidance on what you were looking for in terms of like images, or did you just say make a brain and make it approximately this size and this is what he did?
Oh, I didn't. I had no clue
Okay,
about
you didn't like send him images or say, hey, I like this one, or wow.
Yeah, so just that's in the back of a car. Just
and there was no prototype, like a smaller. Is it kind of?
Yeah.
Do you guys have the relationship where you trust that he knows what he's doing? If you give him the idea, you kind of give him the autonomy to do with it what he will.
Yeah, so I think that was very clear from the beginning.
Okay.
The only thing that I was very specific about, and I wanted this to be a point again, and I think it hopefully shows in my work, is I wanted this to be very vibrant. Like I said, I didn't want this to be a a destructive project. I wanted to have some sort of colors that you don't associate with those organs. So if you open up an anatomy, a kid's anatomy book, they're usually kind of pastelly and red and slight orange or whatever. I really wanted these to be so different than what you normally see in any of the books.
Okay, so you did sort of tell him make it vibrant and make it fun colors as opposed to him making like a pink brain or something.
We, from the very outset, we both decided and discussed what colors are going to go with what organ. So we knew that the brain, we started with blue. Let's just pick the blue ones and the blue hues. And by the end of the project, we actually did every single brick color that Lego makes. So we have gone through the entire spectrum of all the brick colors, which is kind of cool, I think. But I gave him no direction on the build. That's just, that would be insane for me to tell him what to do with a Lego build. He did it all himself. I just said, make me a brain that is freaking cool. But I had no idea it was going to be to the scale. I mean, it was just, and he even said it himself. It was like
2 weeks.
Yeah,
All right.
that's what's crazy.
I mean,
I've seen him do this, and it's so incredible because it's almost, he already has it in his head, and he doesn't use 3D models or anything.
Right.
He will just sit there, put his headphones on.
Is this a shell or is this like a full solid, like inside it's fully brick?
Good question. It is hollow. All of these are
All right. Okay.
So, but
that's probably more impressive actually that it's hollow as opposed to being a full size.
They are hollow, but but they're still quite thick on the inside. So it's not just sort of one brick layer thick. It's got 2 or 3 in there just to sort of obviously to stabilize it and give it some stability. The underneath it as well is really amazingly interesting. Just the detail in there that again was really hard to sort of capture in one image, quite frankly. And I'll discuss how I decided. This is me trying to pick it up. It's incredibly heavy, to say the least. So,
is he based in the LA area near you? Like, how did you get this actual creation?
Yeah, his office isn't too far. His studio is not too far away, so it's about a 20-minute drive. But I was just not expecting. I had to move stuff from my trunk to the front because I just wasn't expecting that I had to fit something that size. It is hollow on the inside, but what's even more amazing is when we end up a little bit later on, while I'll talk about the retouching, the retouchers were so impressed with the fact that it is absolutely dead center symmetrical, like literally to the brick, which is just mental to me. So it's all up in his head. He builds it, he puts his headphones on, and he just has 2 different piles of bricks depending on the colors, and he just goes to town on it.
But
there's no scaling.
Tell you how many hours? Like you said 2 weeks, but like how many hours of those 2 weeks did he spend to make this? Because like if it's a large amount, that's really impressive. If it's a small amount, that's probably even more impressive.
No, that's actually a very good question. I will have an answer tomorrow, which again I will discuss very shortly as to why I'll have an answer tomorrow. But I will get back to you on that, and I will post that because that would be quite interesting to know exactly what it is. He can also
Andrei,
measure.
It takes me like 17 days to build the bit. Like B&H B&H Lego set that I should go grab that. And
everyone has one.
That thing took me like 4 hours.
We were just talking.
That little one, yes.
I know. We were just talking about it.
And I think it took me like 4 hours and 12 take aparts to actually get it correct.
Andrei, are these regular size Lego pieces? Like regular? Wow.
They're literally, I mean, they're different sizes. There's one that I'm sure they have names. I apologize, I don't know them, but they're individual long, thin ones with 4, I think it's pins at the top. I think they're called pins. It's regular Legos. It's just a lot of them. So he just keeps the town on it. What's even more impressive is the fact that he glues it as he goes. So if he makes a mistake at any point, he literally has to take a hammer to that particular section and start.
Okay, so it's glued together.
Glued as you go. And the reason why I know it's glued, I didn't know at the very beginning. I dropped the first one. I did tell him. So this isn't. He's not going to be hearing this for the first time if he's on. Because this was the first one that we did, and he's not a photographer, and he didn't fully understand exactly how I was going to actually be shooting this. He forgot to drill at the very top. On all the other ones, there's holes at the top that have literal cables holding them up. because that's going to be, again, I'll discuss that a little bit later why that's important. But this particular first one, he forgot to do that. And I was like, I don't want you to literally take a drill and go nuts on this piece. It might crack, it might break, or whatever. Let me figure it out. So me and my assistant spent, let's just say, quite a lot of time figuring out what's the best way to hang this. So for me to be able to shoot this. So we actually ended up using a lot of really thick fishing wires. So there was about 4 or 5 of them, as you can see at the very top. I think it was 5 or 6 by the end that we ended up doing it. But at one point, 2 of them just snapped because they were just biting into the edges of the Legos and how sharp they are. And the brain fell from that kind of distance. And honestly, it was fine. It just bounced right back up. So they're definitely tested. They're very sturdy. They will not
Okay, because
break.
that photo you were showing looked like there was a small little hole, or
Like the right side.
yeah, the right
Was
side
that-
looked like it had a little bit of some pieces had fallen off it or something.
Let me,
Somebody took a bite out of it.
Yeah.
Walking Dead.
1 second. Why is it not letting me?
Man, I slightly bump into one of my son's Lego creations, and the whole thing's done.
Whereabouts? Oh, in the lower right.
In the
Not the
still
video,
photo.
one of the
In-
images you were showing.
yeah, in the still photo,
before.
the one right above it on to the right.
Oh, well, okay. So that's specifically done on purpose. I asked them to do that. That's supposed to be the hole that's missing.
That's the whole. Okay,
okay.
okay.
So every one of these that you're going to see, there will be a section where there are bricks that shouldn't be there, and it is a hole. So we decided to do the front section on the brain. Talking
Andrei,
about the actual, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you real quick conceptually?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a whole production going on his side. There's a whole production that's in your mind on your side that you can't execute until he does what he does.
Yeah.
How do you concept this? You don't know what the hole in the organ's going to look. How do you do that?
We planned the whole ahead of time. So this
Okay.
one, again, the brain was a bad example just because it was the very first one. And honestly, I wanted it a little bit deeper. So, but it was too late at that point. When he did the heart, he made those a little bit larger. I'll show you that in a second. But it was we tried to plan as much as we could. We knew the colors. After the brain, roughly, I knew sort of the shape and the size, and I knew where the hole was going to go. And that's really important because as I finished the brain and he was already working on the lungs, the brain was already going to retouching because I knew it was going to be very time consuming for retouching to do what I wanted them to do. So it's kind of on a weird conveyor belt, if you can imagine. So by the time the heart is done and I shot the heart and he's already working on the next one, the brain is nearly finished in post, but the heart is going to post. So it was a constant cycle. And I had a whole spreadsheet and Post-it notes of what's happening where at what point. Weirdly enough as well, and a lot of people actually think that these images are CG'd. They're not. I really cannot stress this enough. Everything was shot in camera. So on the final image that I'll be showing on the website, the trail is made up of hundreds, if not thousands probably, of individual Lego bricks. So when he gave me the brain, he also gave me 2 gigantic bags of 2 shades of blue. Of every single size imaginable. I just gave an example of this one, but there was individual ones, there was big thick ones, I asked him to put 2 or 3 of them together. I asked him to put a big chunk of them together to make it look like a huge chunk was coming off. And we shot all of those individually in multiple angles. And we found the best way to do this was actually with chopsticks and a little bit of blue tack. So my assistant I had 3 assistants that helped me on this project over the 1.5 years. They hate me immensely for this because every single one, after you shot one angle, you hold on to it. And we probably shot 5 or 6 angles of this particular piece. So you just hold it up and then you go, okay, shot, okay, move it this way, adjust the lights. There's no CGI here whatsoever.
I mean, I'm just impressed that he could actually hold chopsticks.
Well, one I had to show.
Well, now I got to ask from the perspective of a photographer, where anybody who has done macro shots knows that you can shoot at f8, f11 and take a picture of something like that, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have that depth. What kind of depth did you need, and how did you work with that?
So because I knew what the final image was going to look like ahead of time, I knew there was going to be a trail to it. There's going to be a blur to it. The concept was when the pieces are really far away, I probably should just show the project first so people get a sense of it. Let me do that. That might be a better way.
You just
So
got
this,
Pete and I over here. We're way too excited about this.
I mean, yeah.
so this is the
Wow.
project in its entirety, the way that it's finished. There are 14 organs that we did, but there's 13 images because 2 of them we combined into 1 image. So the skull is by far the biggest piece. It's about 4 feet tall. I think it weighs just over 65 pounds, and it's made up of just over 36,000 individual pieces.
Jeez.
So it's pretty gigantic. But as
How long did it take him to make that?
that one was by far the longest. I think I was close to a month. But again, I promise I'll get you all those times.
Okay.
And he obviously doesn't count every individual one, but from his experience, he weighs them. So he can figure out how many pieces are in a sculpture based on the weight of the sculpture. Just in case someone's asking, like, is he counting 36,000 times? No, he's not. But as you see, if you see the trail, my vision for this was all the pieces that are really far away. I wanted to give a sense of depth. So I wanted the trail to look like, in some of them that are coming from way out into the distance and they're coming towards the viewer, they're going around the viewer. And then that's where I wanted to give a sense of really fast motion. That's why the blurring in the furthest away places is that much more aggressive. But as it gets closer to the actual holes or the sections of each of the organs, they slow down and they clump up a little bit more together. So they're kind of, my vision was that they're starting to build as they're moving towards the organ until they get big enough, and then they kind of build into the organ, if that makes any sense at all.
That's wild.
But yeah, so a lot people, again, they think this is fake. They think this is AI. They think I just punched in, build me a Lego heart or a tooth or whatever it is, and it's not the case. This is, they're all real. I have the images to prove it. I have the blood, sweat, and tears of everyone that's worked with me on this. And
did you have the paths, the path of the motion of the Legos? Was that even, I mean, how in depth do you go when you're
very
okay?
You should know me by now.
I had to ask. I knew what the answer was going to be.
So that's a very good question. Let me show you an example. I'm a terrible drawer. Everyone knows this. Everyone makes fun of me. I cannot draw at all. So this was my attempt with the lungs, for example, to send to the retoucher and say, I want the trails to look like this. Can you try and visualize it for me? So they did a much better job and kind of came up with a few options of, this is where we think it's going to go. What do you prefer? Do you want it far away? Do you want it close? We then communicated, I like it that it's going, behind the lung, for example. I think on the lung, we ended up with the center right one, because I liked the way it was going behind the exposed one and moving around it, just to give it a sense of, dimension and depth, I guess. So there was a lot of back and forth with the retouchers, and we did this multiple times. Let me see if I have, visualizing trails of how is it going to look? How does it look compared to the rest of the project? Are they looking too similar? Do we want to spin them around the object rather than just sort of circling in a different direction than we previously had? And then once that's done, once we settle on a particular angle that we want to do, it becomes the tedious task of changes. And I'm pretty notorious with edits that I do, and I write them down because it's easier for me to kind of tell them what I'd like for them to change. And this sometimes was 14 or 15 times, because the changes were so much. There were so many moving pieces, literally and figuratively. Sometimes even just a brick that was out of place that for some reason bothered me, they hated me for it. I know, I am aware of this. I asked them to change it, or can you make this trail a little bit thicker? Can you add a little bit more? Because we already had the individual pieces. As you see here, these are all the stills. They just haven't been given the trail movement. So for example, if I want this brick in the lower left to be moved, to be made a little bit larger or a slight different angle, they have all those assets to pull that. So it's just more of the creative direction of the story that we're trying to tell. But yeah, I have plenty of these.
My mind's not blown easily. This is just, and I knew what we had coming to us today, and I think to see the behind the scenes and to hear you talk about it is what really blows my mind because it's just an insane amount of preparation and precision.
I just didn't feel, again, there's no other way of doing it. Maybe could it have been done easier? Yeah, maybe, but I don't think it would have had the same look to it.
So
And
Andre, I want to ask you about the cost associated with all of this, but I'm going to wait until the end of the presentation because there's more that I know you're going to get to that's going to explain some of the why the scope of this is so grand.
yeah, it was grand.
In the back of your head. I do want to address that because I know a lot of times we get a lot of the people that come to these events and they want to know, how can I do something like this? And then they see something to this scale and go, what must this have cost? How do I get funding, or what does this look like? And, you know, I'm sure it didn't start out in your mind as this large of a scale and scope and whatever the cost was associated with it. So you obviously scaled up the cost. How did that come? You know, so I want to talk about that. Just throwing that out there for later, because
No, we can talk about it now
later.
because it's all interconnected. I honestly, when I presented the project to Nathan, I didn't have an idea of how many I wanted to do. And then by the end of it, we ran out of organs. We kept doing stuff that we got to the point where we'd have to do some organs that are so unrecognizable to someone. Even the thyroid, to me, the thyroid is the one that most people will probably struggle to even know which one it is. And it's this lower left one. That's what a thyroid looks like. It looks like a butterfly.
Totally thought that was a game controller.
It looks like from Star Wars.
But before I answer your question, some people might have picked up on this. So if you see, there's a few that are red, and the reason for that is that because those are all the bones. So we decided to keep bones are actually an organ. It is official. I did check it. So pelvis, the spine, the femur that we have here, and obviously the skull. That's why they're all the same color. So it was important to have continuity, and also we ran out of colors because there's a lot here. So for example, in the stomach, there's two tones. There's a darker purple and a light purple. Same with the green. You have the light green and the dark green. There's actually 3 types of greens in there. The heart has, goodness me, 4 or 5 different colors. The liver is, and my wife is in the medical field, and she was blown away with just how anatomically correct everything is. I mean, that's the gallbladder right there, and this has some scientific name that I forgot, the bit that's in the middle of the liver. Anyway, so to answer your question in terms of the cost, I think we have to look at it both types of costs. It's the amount of time that so many people put into this. Forget Nathan and his insanity of how amazing he is at building this, and it took him a month to do that. That's just insane. For most projects, that's just insane as it is. Even the concept of I had to rent a truck to fit the skull because I couldn't fit it in my car. So there's cost associated from that perspective. And then my assistants, I had 2 or 3 assistants that had to help me all the time, holding the sticks up and doing everything else. Then getting into post-production. I mean, those guys spent over 200, it was Recon Farmhouse. I have to give them a massive shout out because I don't think this project would have been anywhere near as good. Their level of detail and their attention to that was absolutely insane. They spent over 250 hours of retouching, I believe, in total for this. And I did push them because I had a look already in my head of how I wanted it to be. And it's not that they were doing it. There was just so many pieces that needed adjusting. And, the background had to be identical as much as we can, just change the colors. What are the tones? What's the shadow underneath each of them? They had to have continuity. But let me just share a few more of the BTS because that's more interesting than looking at my face. I mean, the heart in itself with all the different ventricles. Oh, that's right. I that brought up a really interesting point. This was the second one that we did. And I think this is probably one of the more intricate ones. I mean, the heart is really incredible with the aortas and veins and whatever else. What was really tricky from the very outset, which affected the cost as well, was how many angles am I doing of this? And with the brain, I shot about 4 or 5 different angles. That took me like a day and a half to close to 2 days of moving in position, and whatever else was really complicated and difficult. So I had to make a decision. What's this final project going to look like? And ultimately, I just decided it's just easier if we just do a dead-on shot rather than the front 3/4 and the back 3/4 and an overhead and whatever else. And the heart is one of those organs that kind of suffered as a result of this, because you just can't see the back of it. You don't get to see this particular hole over here, or ventricle here, or left, right, and center. You won't see that until you actually see the sculpture in person. So that certainly helped with the costs associated with it. This was, for example, the first attempt to do the heart, and I absolutely hated it. It looked nothing like the brain in terms of having that shadow. You know, the shadow is too strong here. It needs to be softened. It's too close to the floor. It needs to be moved up. So it was just that sort of back and forth of and again, keep in mind, like Derek, like you mentioned, I'm already shooting the next one. One's already nearly finishing in post, and I'm working on with the retouchers, a separate section of the retouchers to finish the middle one, if that makes sense. So there was so many things that were moving at the same time. It was kind of complicated to do.
How did you handle? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
One quick thing, because this is another thing that's important. Because we didn't have all the assets all at the same time, I had to wait 2 weeks, a month, or whatever, however long it was. It was really crucial for me to write down and know my lighting settings. I had the same height, I had the same distance from the camera, the same lens, the same power source. So all of that was recorded. I knew ahead of time as soon as one was coming, unless he just did something insane like the skull, which was way bigger than the brain, that affected everything else. I had to move the lights up a little bit, but then you just compensate, right? It's not the rule of thirds. Goodness me, I'm having a mind blank. It'll come to me. But basically, I had to move my lights up. Then you have to adjust the power accordingly to still keep the same look and feel across the board. So that kind of continuity was really, really important to do, just in case someone had a question on that one.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, was just due to the fact that all the shapes are differently. How much are you moving the? I mean, you have to keep the light the same, but do you have to shift something a little bit just to account for a different shape to get the same look on a different shape?
We did, and that's why I think the brain was really good. If he would have built me a really small one and then we started ramping up, I think that would have gone the wrong way. So even though this was a shock to the system of how massive and insane it was great because it allowed that sort of initial, excuse the pun, the blueprint basically of everything going forward. And that's why we spent so much time on this one, because I knew that if I could get this right, it would apply to pretty much within reason everything else. So I initially started out with, I whenever I start my shoots, I always start with one light and I build it up. So I see what that light does, add a second light, what does that do? Add a third light, how does that affect my first and second light? So I always build my lights up. And I did get to the point where it was kind of ridiculous. I got to like 5 or 6 lights and multiple bounces to try and get into the nooks and crannies. And ultimately, I just felt like it was losing the sort of essence, and it was losing. And it's so hard to see without physically seeing the piece, but all the blue in here is kind of cool to keep it dark. It gives you that contrast. So what we ended up doing was actually, I think for the most part, we used 2 lights and bounces. Nice and easy, nice and
like, Andrei, can you talk about which specific lights you used and how you scale up, or which ones you use to scale up?
Yeah, I can. I certainly can. I'm trying to find a good example of my setup. So for me, the gigantic edge mask in the back there is an absolute lifesaver for me. I use that on pretty much everything. And the reason why that's so great is because it just highlights the edges. And that's all I want from that backlight. And it's usually on pretty high power because so much of it is covered by the edge mask. But I just want to highlight the edges. And it gives it that nice little kick around, like I said, those edges that then when I bring in my second or my third light, it doesn't get overpowered by it. And it still makes quite a big difference. So backlight, overhead shot, And usually I would bring in my softbox. I would have my 30 to 120 Broncolor softboxes. So I shoot exclusively Broncolor because in my opinion, they're the best in the industry. Specifically for a project like this, where you needed that continuity in the light quality. It was going to be a week or 2 or 3 weeks before shooting the next one, it had to have that consistency. So that's, for the most part, that was pretty much my setup. There we go. I have my top light, I have a backlight, I've got a side light, one bounce for anything else that I want to fill in from the other side. And we actually put tiny little LEDs inside the hole, because usually a lot of the holes have a different color. So that hole is, I think, lighter than, yeah. So this one, for example, in here, just to bring it out, if you drop some tiny little LED lights in there, it brings it up. But then again, they're LEDs, they're not flash. You got to change your settings. It's going to be a much longer exposure. So you had to make adjustments, and then everything obviously gets comped. Before anyone asks, which hopefully they don't have to at this point because they should know me by now, I focus stacked everything. It had to be focus stacked. Just again, to your point of having to have that sharpness all the way through from front to back. It wasn't gigantic, just because, again, the piece, I wasn't that close to them. I was shooting on a 120 macro Schneider lens, which is a fantastic lens, shooting on a phase 151 megapixel digital back. And because I'm on the 120, because I wanted that compression, I didn't want to get on, like, if I shot with a 35, the pieces would have just sort of expanded outwards and been horrible. So because I'm stepping back a little bit, my focus stacking wasn't going to be 200 or 300 or whatever that I'm used to. It was probably in the 50 or 60 range to get that focus stack. So then after you've done that entire focus stack, I think I have one very quick one here of the brain. So for example, you've done all your stacks, and that's helicon focus. That's then finding every single sharp point that you've taken and then builds it all together to make sure that it's sharp all the way through. And that's how you can guarantee sharpness in its entirety. I had one more thing to say and I forgot. Oh, here we go. That's one example of putting the LED inside. Nothing, no other lights. This is just the LED light inside of it with a long exposure. All right, so we found that if you we have an LED light in there, that just glows up for the inside. So then you take that image and then you stack it with your other images that you show with a regular light, and you then have light inside the organ, and then you have your outside lights for the top. Here's one with,
and you put LEDs inside all of them?
Most of them, yeah, because because it was two-tone, let me share the actual project. And all of this was trial and error. I mean, we didn't know. Some of them just didn't have the hole coming all the way through. Whereas this one, for example, it was hollow all the way and down to the bottom. So because we decided we're going to use the lighter trail, we tried it with the deep purple and the trail just got lost. So I wanted to match the same trail as the inside, which means it was that much more important for me to show the viewer that that's what the inside is looking like. We tried it, and it's a little bit here too. Otherwise, this would have been black. All the holes would have been black. This one we didn't feel like we needed to because of the contrasting that already exists. So it didn't work for all of them. It wasn't necessary for all of them, but wherever it was, we felt like we had to do that.
I gotta point out how impressive the final products are when you look at like the cell phone BTS of like the specular highlights of, because I thought about it. I wanted to wait and give you a chance to talk about the project. I didn't want to ask it right away, but in my head, I'm like, Legos are shiny. And all that light, I'm like, that had to have been hell.
We did, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, we figured it out from the very beginning, and then I haven't thought about it since. So thank you for bringing it up. It was a challenge. They are shiny, and that's why you've got to use a lot of diffusion. So 216, the Lee filter 216 is your friend, especially for something that reflective. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a kick, but you got to make sure that it's not just one, and especially that these are 3-dimensional. These aren't 2D. So if you've got a light coming from your softbox on one edge, this is going to be really bright and this is going to blow out and it's going to make things really shiny. But as it curves around, this is going to be super dark. So your understanding of light and how, whether it's another light that you're bringing in or it's a bounce or how much diffusion do you use, you don't want it to be too diffused because then it just looks really soft. You still want it to keep the sharpness. So it was just a lot of trial and error. I've never shot Legos before. I have no clue how to shoot a freaking Lego, but hopefully this just makes someone go, let me try something I've always been worried about trying. Just do it and figure it out, because you're just going to learn stuff. I've learned, again, like any project that I've done, you just learn so much through it, through mistakes and honest mistakes, and sit with your assistant and just figure out problems. It's a round table of like, hey, what do you think we should do? This thing it's just not working. I'm not feeling it. What do you think? Let's talk it out. Even when you get to the retouching, this was another thing. There was I forgot which one it was. I think it was the liver. No, sorry, the stomach. Shot, focus stacked, sent, done. Retoucher gets it. It's not looking good. It's just not looking good. There's something wrong with it. The colors just seem off. You need to go back and redo it. And that's why I had them. And because of that, and my wife will hate me for this, I decided that I'm not going to give any of the pieces back until the project is done, just in case we finish number 14 and then we look at number 10 and go, oh my God, this just looks completely terrible. It looks off compared to the other ones. So by the end, our living room,
oh my God,
was full of Legos.
And how long of a time period were they just
9 months
there? 3 months?
9.
9
oh, wow.
months.
So they were built
They
up.
were part of the family.
Oh my good. Oh, I actually felt really sad. We had to let them go. But there's to give you a sense, I mean, that's obviously a chair. There's the spine, the femur, the tooth, thyroid, skull. 2 of them we didn't do. And I think we're going to try and do them at a later date. It just didn't quite look as good as we wanted them to. Which ones did we not do? We didn't do this whole nephrectomy system. So this is basically your kidneys and your bladder. And then we also didn't do the hand. And the hand is so incredible. It looks amazing. It looks incredible. But when we were trying to shoot it, let me see if I can find where the hand is. We didn't know which angle to do it. Do you do it top down? But that doesn't look right. Do you do it this way? It kind of looks like you're shaking your hand. That didn't quite look right. Do you do it upwards at an angle? It's shot. Everything is shot, but it hasn't been done in post. So this one is not on the website.
Interesting. And what became of the sculptures?
So as you can probably tell, I'm in a hotel room. I am actually in Paris, and I'm really excited because it's been delayed a few times because of Parisians' permits and everything coming up with the Olympics. But Nathan has this amazing show that he's been doing for the last 10 years called The Art of the Brick. And it's taken around the world. He's gone to multiple cities, and it's just all his sculptures that are just amazing and incredible. And we didn't want to do this. We didn't even think about it at the very beginning. We thought we were just going to do a few organs and it would just look cool. But as the project developed and as we saw the images coming together, he really liked it, and he's invited me to be part of his show. And Organogenesis is having its official debut in Paris at Galerie Lafayette in Montparnasse tomorrow at 6:30, which is why I'm here for 24 hours. Because awesome. I just could not miss it. I wanted to, and that's another, oh goodness me, we're running out of time, but I know the other process is, once we're done with all the images, now we have to talk about printing. Now we have to talk about tonal ranges. We have to find the right printer. We have to find the right paper. That's because a very shiny paper is going to be too much. You need something that's a little bit muted down. We ended up with the Hammermüller Burrito 260, I believe it was. Just because, and we did multiple test shoots and strips of the prints themselves. So full size strips were done, small ones just to sort of see it again, the tonal ranges, and have to give a shout out to Film Solutions. They just absolutely killed it with the tones. But I must have gone back 4 or 5 times to inspect the prints, see them in person. Um, is it the right color? Is there anything that I'm not seeing on the image on a smaller screen that when you print big, it's just gonna showcase through? Which we did. We had to reprint the skull, I think, 3 times because there was an issue that we saw in one of the shadows that I couldn't pick up even on my TIFF files. I couldn't pick it up because I wasn't zooming in at 50,000%. So the prints are here. They're loaded up. They're ready to go, and we printed them specifically for the Parisian market because I know that apartments here aren't gigantic, so I couldn't do a 48 by 72. We did a 43 by 54, I believe. And the skull, because the skull is basically 2 images combined together, so it's a lot narrower and a lot wider. So the skull, I think, is like 45 by 97 inches. So
And are the actual sculptures there in Paris too?
they are. They are. I gave them up from my house and they went straight to Paris. I have images of that too. Actually, I wonder if I still have it. But oh, I did want to show you this. The retoucher had a giggle at this one. So this is zoomed in at about 200% on the intestines, and they found this hilarious. And these are very low res, so please don't comment on that. But you kept zooming in, and I'm very careful, but there was a
Oh my
bug
God.
after I cleaned it and I used the air dust and the blower and whatever. This bug must have died for the greater good
That's
project.
hilarious.
I don't believe I have them moving the pieces, but yeah, they
And then you
came
saved
and
that bug for that insect collection photography
That's
that
right.
you have too, right?
It's just everything is ongoing and constantly moving at all times. But yeah, I don't know if I've answered all the questions or if we have questions from anyone, but it was a long project. A personal one for me, again, because I felt, like I mentioned from the beginning, it was my silly way, I guess, of trying to deal with my mom's condition. And I don't know if that even showcases that. In some ways, it doesn't even matter because it's for me. That's the personal side of the project. But yeah,
Did it help?
yeah.
Good.
I don't know how. I don't know why. It just I want her brain to be what it was, and this is my way of kind of showing that. Hopefully, that comes across. But if anything, it's bright, it's colorful. It's we presented this to Lego. I had a meeting in London with a creative Lego person, creative director at Lego, and they said they've never seen anything like this from anything that Lego's ever done or anyone has done. Nathan confirmed, and I trust him, that no one has ever done human organs to this scale or this sort of intricacy, I guess, if you want to call it that. They might have done something smaller, but not. I mean, the brain is.
Are they
You
gonna
really
take his
need to see.
designs and make some kid-sized versions and kits?
That's one of my goals.
Good.
I think
That's
it would be really
awesome.
cool for Lego. I mean, for goodness sake, we have praying mantises from fans. This could be a really cool project where you can build human organs and get a better understanding and
Yeah.
the show itself. I haven't seen it yet. That's why I just landed this morning. So when we were building the concept for the show, the pieces are all gonna be hanging, and then the associated print is gonna be right next to it. So you can walk around the sculpture and then see the print there. And there's gonna be a section where it's for kids, obviously. So it gives you some weird facts about, I don't know, the heart can pump 50,000 liters a year or something. So we're trying to make it as interactive as possible for adults and kids as well, so that hopefully they can learn something about their human body.
Good.
Wow.
And it's going to go hopefully to multiple cities, so it should hopefully not.
Ask. I know you hinted at New York. I'm crossing my fingers, hoping you get here.
Yeah,
As
right?
soon as I find out, I will let you guys know.
Okay, because I'm sure B&H
God.
will want to get involved in the in-person show for that as well. So Derek, we
Oh,
got to
yeah.
keep this in mind.
I know that
Yeah.
I feel bad for anybody who has to come on this platform after this. This
Oh,
is
for
like
goodness, no, absolutely not. No.
we're closing down the event space. This is the last presentation we're gonna do. This, I mean, man, you're my hero, Andres. This is
Oh, absolutely
Dude,
not.
it's insane. I've been sitting here the whole time like mind blown. And I've seen some like there's some cool stuff out there, but this is just I think it's just which comes as no surprise. I mean, your level of precision every time it's like, all right, what is he going to do next? The way you think, the way you problem solve on the fly, because I think you could sit here for 4 hours talking about the preparation and it's still no one will fully grasp the amount of problem solving that you have to do on the fly because there's things that you just can't possibly foresee with all the planning in the world, which I
But
think is so cool.
that's what makes it fun. That's what I mean. I think as creatives, that's when you that's when you really start exploring, is when you're problem solving. That's when you go, hang on a minute, what if we do it this way that you didn't think of before? I always start with an idea in my head, and I already have the final image in my head. I don't know how I'm going to get there, and I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the final image because I might think of something along the way that's better. My assistant, a lot of times, my assistant's like, "Oh, what if we do this? Yeah, let's try it. It might work, or it may not." Retouchers too. I mean, the input from the retoucher it wasn't just like this is what I want, go get it done. It was how can we do something really cool here? What can we do that we can push the envelope? And I don't know if we did. So it's not about glory chasing or anything like that. It's just more about can we create something that's different, that's unique, that's maybe hasn't been done before. Maybe it sparks an imagination in someone to do something. That's really the goal. Because there are better photographers out there than me. There always will be. It's just can you be creative enough and be daring enough to get an idea, find the right people that can do it, and just get it done.
How much shooting are you do now? Obviously, you're shooting tethered. You're taking a look. You have a creative team looking at stuff. You're looking at stuff as you're shooting it. But this isn't like a corporate headshot shoot where you're like, okay, we got a couple angles. I think we're good. How, like, when do you know? Because you have to, right? You have to know you have it before.
And how many terabytes of photography and data did you generate for this? And what storage products did you use to put it all on?
He's got a SanDisk Lego the same size.
Well, interesting you say that. Thank you, Western Digital and Sanders Professional for. I mean, there's just no way that I could do this without the kind of storage that would sustain this. This is not on the same level as Exoskeleton, where I needed tens and tens of thousands of images, but it wasn't that far off. Every one of those individual pieces was shot in multiple angles, and you saw the trail that. Let me show you just, for example, just one color, which was a screenshot that the retoucher sent me. So they're all shot individually. So if I hear anyone accusing me of AI, I will get very upset because it's not the case. But yeah, I don't know when you know. I think you've got to get your lighting right. Lighting is crucial. To me, lighting is what separates photographers. Anyone can take a good shot, but your understanding of lighting, and I'm still learning. I mean, for goodness sake, no one should be called a master lighter or master photographer or anything. I just don't believe in that concept. Master means that you've made it. You haven't made it. You never will make it. That's just get that mindset. You're always going to be learning. I think you just feel it and you try and do the best that you can. You apply the same settings that for something that worked, especially that this project had some continuity to it over a span of time. You do your focus stack, you see it, you double check it, you look at it at 200% across the board. And that's why I held on to all the pieces, much to my wife's annoyance, because just in case I wake up in the middle of the night and I go, oh, you know what? I think I could have used that other bounce. That would have been better here. And I don't want to give an extra 10 hours of retouching that has to be done by the retouching team. I can try and fix that and make it better and make their life easier, which I did on two occasions where I had to reshoot. And sometimes you have to just admit it's just not, it didn't shoot well enough. You messed up. Accept it, learn from it, move on, shoot again, repeat. And I have 14 projects that I'm working on right now. So
Man.
before you, I need to shoot, otherwise my brain rots. So
Danny and I were just talking about motivation and projects. So I know Danny's behind the scenes right now. We gave him a little portrait project to shoot on his way into work. And how you feeling, Danny?
It's very different, Danny. Not listen to him. It's very different. But
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and the prints will look good again with that kind of with shooting with the phase is amazing. You get that tonal range that's unmatched. You get 16-bit of color, especially for a project like this that has so much color bandwidth. You know, like I said, we went through the entire spectrum of all the Legos. So there's a lot of things that were needed to be used at the same time. You know, the Broncolor, the SanDisk, the Phase One, my studio stand, the knowledge of my assistants, the incredible guys at Recon Farmhouse, Nathan's amazing brilliance. If he hadn't built me these incredible things, there's only so much I can do. So they look good because Nathan allowed for me to look good. So it's so much of a team effort, especially with this particular project, more than most that I've done. And those are the ones that I like the most because you're proud of it. You know, it's a group thing. It's not just one person.
I was just thinking, I didn't even, I don't know why I didn't process it, but I'm like, I rarely shoot with my medium format and it's only 100 megapixel. It's not 150 megapixel because
Matter.
to process it is like, God, I can't even imagine the amount of images, the processing, 150 megapixels. Those files are monsters.
Why do you think I'm best friends with Pete, amongst other things? Pete, I need a hard drive. I'm running out of hard drives. No,
God, you need a vault.
I do. I mean, I think people at SanDisk Professional freaking hate me because I just go through so many hard drives. And also I don't believe
8-bay and 4-bay shuttles have I sent you?
Yes, you have. Thank you. I appreciate that immensely. But I'm also probably making your life more difficult because I'm a big believer in not deleting files. I just don't, unless something is just way out of focus and horrible and whatever. I don't like to delete files. And this is probably a bad project as an example because there's so much focus stacking involved. But if I'm shooting something as a project, I keep everything. And the reason for that, and I might have mentioned this on one of the earlier podcasts or webinars, is every now and again, every few months or so, I like to look back to what I shot 3 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago. And I look at the images that at that time I felt were really good. And then I look at them now and I go, those are not good. So for me, it's like a litmus test where how is my progression going? Why did I think at that time that image was good? And how far have I come that I wouldn't even choose that image right now? So that's why for me, I always like to keep my work and I archive it and I have backups of backups. And Pete and I have had discussions about this, like how many times you should back up your files and where should you store them. And for goodness, yeah, there you go. And for goodness sake, put a password on your portable hard drives. I'm going to say that until I'm blue in the face. Because that's another thing. I mean, I would
about
awesome. I can't believe no one's doing that. It seems like no one's doing it. Every portable hard drive I have, the first thing I do, I format it and I create a password for it. If it gets lost, if I lose it, if it's someone steals it on set, at least I know it's going to be tough for them to get into it. So 100% put a password on all my drives have passwords.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard that, which is embarrassing as a professional photographer. Wow.
Your big drives, your portables, everything is literally the first thing I do. And I feel like, Pete, I think we need a webinar just on that.
Yeah.
Seriously, you never hear. You hear the backup, which three times this, like 3 backups for this. I can't even. My mind is truly blown.
I have one hard drive. First of all, I do have a big Dropbox folder. So all my TIFF files, all my finished TIFF files are in that. So that's one backup. I do one backup that is my secondary one that actually sits next to my primary. And then I do another one that I take off site. So in case anything, and I'm RAID. Oh God, Pete, what am I? RAID 5? I think I'm RAID 5. 5 is the split, right? The 50
No, that's RAID 1 is 50-50.
Oh, I'm RAID 1. So I'm super conservative because just in case something fails, like I want to make sure that I'm as protected as I can be. But again, Pete, you might tell your viewers to not necessarily have to do what I do and
There's
be that
trade-offs
conservative.
for RAID 1 and RAID 5 for sure.
Yeah, at a minimum RAID 5.
Wow.
So
look, I don't have much to say. I'm pretty just mind blown here. But Andrei, every time you come on, it's just amazing. So I want to thank you, Pete.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Like I said, Pete, you always bring us the best of the best. It's always great. Andre, it's like you have me at the point of looking forward to the next time you're going to be on because I want to see what you do next. So I
Well,
know
I'll decide which one of the 14 I think is good
there
enough
we
to
go.
bring to B&H and SanDisk.
There you go.
But yeah. So I don't know if anyone, I wasn't checking the chat, so I don't know if anyone has any questions.
If anybody does have any questions, speak now or forever
Yeah,
hold
I
your
haven't seen any come through.
Lego pieces.
Is anyone on? Did we just have a four-way call?
I think everyone's probably sitting there like I am, like,
Well,
what?
I mean, it's taken a long time to do this, and there was a lot of this was definitely a difficult project. I'm not gonna lie. But I love this is what I like because it pushes me. I have to do better. You have to do better every time.
Have you
So
every single project you've had, do you look back and you're like, there's something I would have
always,
changed? Always.
this is actually one of the projects. I mean, I still see faults in these images. Again, because there's so many moving pieces where I can, this brick can move a little bit here, but that's just me being me, which is not normal. This is one of the projects that I feel like I got 80% right.
Wow.
Whereas most of my projects, I feel like I got 40% right. So I'm always very judgmental of my work in a negative way. I think every photographer is, right. I think if someone finishes a project and they go, this is the greatest thing that's ever been done, or you should be very worried about that.
I think I speak for the entire viewer base and say, I will take your 40% any day.
Well,
give me 20%. I'm good.
It's all trial and error. What I did is not difficult. In the grand scheme of things, it's really not difficult. If you just keep at it and you keep practicing and you keep making mistakes and you keep learning from them and ask advice from the right people, it's not rocket science. It's just, I think to me, what's more, if you want to call it unique, isn't necessarily the work. It's more the concept and coming up with that concept of something. And I scour the internet as much as I can. Obviously, everything's pretty much been done, but I try and scour and I look at things that haven't been done and how can I do it in a way that's, I don't know, unique, different, pushes an envelope. I whatever it is, but it's tough because everything has been done.
Yeah. Well, look, your creativity and your work ethic are definitely inspiring. I think you hit the nail on the head. You're doing the work. It's in a generation where people just want stuff overnight and we want to do projects. We want to sit down and do a project in one sitting. This shows you that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of thought. It takes team. It takes communication. It takes really having high standards for perfection and not selling yourself short. So, there we go. We did get a question in on the backups. Susan Dangberg joining us on YouTube. Please list all your backups. Major appreciation.
How long do you have? Just to confirm, Susan, you're asking in terms of my process of doing a backup. I think that's what you're asking, so I'll answer it. If not, please put it in the chat again. So my process is the following: I shoot everything. I have it as the phase 1 file is IQ. No, goodness me, I forgot the file name for the phase. It'll come to me, but it's in the file. It's in the phase 1 format. I have it converted to a TIFF just to be on the safe side. I have both of them. If I have to focus stack everything, then I'll just have one file of that stacked image. So that's going to live in its own folder. When I have the final image from the retouchers, that goes in its own folder. I then convert it to a JPEG for social media or whatever else. So that has its own folder. And all of those that's when I take all of those under one project umbrella and I put it on all those drives. So I not only have my original raw files, IIQ, thank you. My brain came. IIQ phase 1 files, the TIFF files, the flattened TIFF, the flattened Helicon images or Zarine, depending on what I'm using. In this instance, it was Helicon because the stack wasn't deep. It was only about, like I said, 50 to 70 images. If it was more, Zarine is by far better. And then the final folder is going to be the finished one that I get back from retouching. That's the one that I then convert into JPEG that goes on my website, that goes on social media. But each of them live in their own folders under the big umbrella of Lego project or whatever it is. And then I take that, I have it on my on a portable drive, and I have it on my secondary drive and my tertiary drive. That goes away, and then I also upload just the TIFF files, just the final TIFF files in case the house burns down. At least I have my final TIFF files that I can print, I can use whatever it is. I don't need to have all the individual ones for Dropbox because that would get too big. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Perfect. Well, Andrei, I want to thank you again. I know you've had a long day traveling, but it's always great to see you, always great to hear you talk about your work. Pete, obviously always good to have you on. Any final words, guys? Pete, you want to take us out here?
No, I think, Derek, you've said it all. I just, we're a little bit awestruck by this whole project. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me again. I appreciate, obviously, B&H and Western Digital, Sanders, the whole family. Thank you for having me.
Yep.
And keep shooting.
Yes, keep shooting. Stay inspired. Everyone else, go. Let's go recover our brains right now. Andrei, look forward to seeing you.
And I'll post some BTS from the show tomorrow. So I'll post some images of what it looks like in its final thing. So just follow me on Instagram, or that's probably where I'll do it.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
Yes, there we go. We dropped Andrei's website, Andrei Duman Photography, on Instagram. If you guys aren't following, shoot him a follow and follow along. But a huge thank you to the guys again, the entire SanDisk team, Andrei and his team, and all of our viewers. We do it for you guys. Can't do it without you. Another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space in the books. Catch y'all next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.